Hello and welcome to another episode of Grey Matter Talks Tech, a podcast for dev and IT enthusiasts looking for insights from industry experts. We discuss emerging tech, the latest trends and best practices for innovation. I'm your host for today's episode, Leanne Bevan, Vendor Marketing Manager at Grey Matter, and I'm delighted to be joined by one of our Microsoft specialists, Chris Chandler. In this episode, we'll delve into the cloud marketplace and why it's a great route to market for ISVs and SaaS providers. So hey Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Hey Leanne, how's it going?
Very good, thank you. So before we dive in, could you tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. So I am Chris Chandler, Microsoft Alliance Manager for Grey Matter. I was until very recently. I'm in the process of transitioning to a new role, which is our head of marketplace for EMEA. Which has actually been quite a nice transition from a Microsoft Alliance role that I was doing, because that role had me not only being a Microsoft licensing nerd and talking all things Microsoft solutions as well as Microsoft programs to ISVs and SaaS providers, but actually that evolved in the last 2 years more specifically to talk about how to help those ISVs, those SaaS providers, get their solutions in the Microsoft Azure marketplace as they've adopted cloud delivery models for their solution. So it's a nice transition. In terms of background about me, I've been in the industry for about 20 years. I'm somewhat bilingual. I speak both Microsoft and West Country English, but as I say, ultimately everything that I've done in those 20 years has been Microsoft.
That's cool. Really interesting career journey there. So, delving into ISVs and SaaS providers, what's making them consider go-to-market using marketplaces?
Yeah, sure. So from my perspective, there's been two main changes. I mean, technically, you could say three, but two main changes in buyer behavior that are ultimately influencing how ISVs, SaaS providers are utilizing or considering marketplaces as as one of their go-to-market channels. The first is how organizations are changing their approach to technology adoption. So I appreciate, Leanne, you're not as old as me, but if you think back to the global recession that happened in 2008, that really had organizations thinking about how they needed to tighten their belts, possibly reduce headcount, things that ultimately were impacting how technology was adopted by that organization. They needed to invest in technology for their needs at the time, and not necessarily invest in additional costly over provisioned hardware based on maybe an assumed future need, because they needed to provision for today, not 5 years time, which was kind of the normal approach in and around there. That was further evident if you think about the pandemic more recently, right, where the needs to rapidly adopt technology for the need of enabling remote communications. If you think about how quickly businesses were adopting Zoom, Teams, etc., that was really another example of kind of that rapid rate of adoption for technologies, and that kind of getting their hands on that technology sooner as they needed it. So that's kind of the first example, is really that rate of technology adoption, right, is the first thing. The second thing is the impact actually of generations that are now employed and of employment age, and how they procure technology. So if we think about the fact that millennials and Gen Z now make up around 60% of employment in the UK, they all grew up in the internet age and being able to procure software instantly on demand. If you think about your smartphone, right, you can go and get an app quite easily. Let me ask you a question. So how did you buy music, say 10, 15 years ago? What was your?
I probably would have bought CDs, I think.
Yeah, so you'd go into a HMV, right?
Or Woolies,
You'd buy
maybe.
it. There you go. There you go. You'd buy exactly that. You'd buy a CD. You'd buy your album, your single, right?
Yeah.
Maybe 5 years ago, you'd maybe purchase an MP3 to play on your iPod, or for those that had it, Microsoft Zune, right?
Yeah.
Versus how would you listen to music now? What would you say your approach to?
So I would say it would be online streaming services like your Spotify, your Apple Music, or even just YouTube.
Exactly that, right? So we've gone from how acquisition of music has evolved, right? It's from going into a physical store, buying something, a CD, then evolved to still a digital approach to purchase, which is online, maybe buying an MP3, to now actually streaming, consuming all the content that you need. It's not the only industry, right, that's been impacted by that change. If we think about video, right, Blockbuster through to Netflix.
Yeah.
Even an example more recently, I was looking at buying a new car. Traditional approach would be to go into a showroom, talk to somebody, buy the car there and then. But you've now got CarWow, other platforms where you can purchase, acquire even big ticket items digitally. So if we think about that sort of behavior, to be able to more instantly acquire, more easily acquire things, whether they be software, music, video, cars, whatever it is, that is something that, as I say, the millennials, the Gen Z people who are now making up a vast amount of employment in the UK, that's what they're used to. And bringing it back to your question,
Yeah.
these kind of the immediacy of being able to adopt technology, the ease of procurement, are kind of two real pieces that are driving the need for marketplace, because ultimately you can list your solution in a marketplace. Somebody can go and buy it easily, but also through possible automation, they can also deploy that solution more easily.
Yeah. And are there any industries that are less likely to want to move, do you think? Or for security reasons, wanting to stay kind of more on premise with stuff?
I'd say that was a thing, shall we say? But as
Mm.
marketplaces have evolved, it's become less of a reason not to. So you look at AWS, you look at Microsoft, they are building cloud infrastructure specifically for industry, right? Microsoft have
Yeah.
got Azure for government in certain regions where that government organization can go and purchase a marketplace solution and deploy it to their own personal Azure influence or instance rather. So it is a cloud version of an application that is hosted
Yeah.
by the client within their own environment. So yes, there are still some industries that maybe are a little behind the curve in terms of cloud compliance and guidance. But what we're finding is it's becoming less and less of a thing over time, because you can wrap so much compliance, security, capability around cloud solutions these days.
Of course. And so, what opportunities do the marketplaces create for ISVs and SaaS providers?
Sure. So just harking it back to your first question, really is probably the easiest way to do that. So you're firstly fulfilling the expectations of those business buyers by enabling them to adopt your solutions more immediately, and procure them more easily. So there's no longer that need to purchase infrastructure, wait for it to be delivered, deploy the solution, configure the software, and then actually go through adoption. Right, we're removing that preamble.
Yeah.
Using those cloud-based delivery models via a marketplace, kind of significantly hastens the adoption cycle for an organizations. And secondly, obviously building on that point, we're enabling them to simplify the purchase process. So there's opportunity to reduce the need to go through possible rounds of proposal, procurement agreements, because purchasing via a marketplace should ultimately simplify the journey for a client and offer that client more autonomy, reduced complexity, even access different approaches to payment methods such as credit card on account via subscription. There's a really interesting report from Forrester. It's called The State of Business Buying. I think they've just updated it for this year. Certainly it only recently came out, but that highlights that 91% of business buyers surveyed were dissatisfied with the procurement process, and or that procurement process actually stalled. So using marketplaces and digital approaches to client engagement, there is ultimately an opportunity here for ISV SaaS-based providers to delight their customers and not really be part of that 91%. Now, what I would say is that it's kind of a counterpoint to some regards, but just because you're selling via a marketplace, we shouldn't necessarily assume that there's no need for any form of consultancy with that client. If you look at that same Forrester report, in actual fact, it actually states that it's becoming more and more important to be more consultative with your own client, engage with your client, your ability to support buying groups within an organization. I think it suggested that when making a business buying decision, they actually on average 13 people were involved in that business decision. So an ISV's opportunity to get involved, consult, influence the decision is really really crucial. It's just ultimately it's the point in which they're ready to procure and adopt the solution where they want to crave the simplicity.
Yeah, of course. It does sound like it makes it so much easier both for the end user and for the ISV to manage the whole process.
Very, very much so. Very much so. You think if you're automating a deployment, right, it's easier for that ISV to rinse, repeat each deployment on a customer basis. Yes, there may be some individual configuration requirements that you need to do, but ultimately, you're going to be, as an ISV, you're reducing your time investment and can obviously scale your client deliveries, or even run more leaner as an organization, right? Because you don't need necessarily that upfront headcount to do deployments for your clients, right?
Yeah. So what are the marketplace or hyperscaler offerings that people can choose from?
So the kind of the two top of mind ones are obviously Microsoft and AWS marketplaces. As I said at the beginning, I've been very aligned to Microsoft for my 20 years in the industry. But what I always remind people, right, is AWS still has the largest percentage of infrastructure market share globally. So, yes, I tend to talk a lot aligned to Microsoft and their capabilities. But whenever I talk to ISVs, I certainly say don't forget about AWS. You can build your marketplace offer based on Microsoft, because maybe you're deploying on Microsoft Cloud and Microsoft is your preferred cloud provider. But maybe don't cut your nose off to spite your face, because you may have clients who are wholly invested in AWS. So build your solution possibly with kind of multi-cloud delivery models in mind. But circling back to actually answer your question, and again, I will focus this with a Microsoft lens, but there's kind of 6 areas that I tend to think about in terms of how those hyperscalers, those Microsoft in this case specifically, enable ISVs and SaaS providers. The first is access to market. So using Microsoft as the example, the Azure marketplace has 9 million active monthly users procuring via the platform. So presence is being listed, being in that marketplace, being in the shop window is a good place to be. More traditionally, Microsoft has a partner network, right? And that partner network is made up of 90,000 partners globally who can sell your solution. They can do that via the subscription, or you could be working with them in a more direct engagement. And Microsoft have recently released this ability called multi-party private offers, which enables you to, as an ISV, as a SaaS provider, propose to that Microsoft partner, and for then that Microsoft partner to take your offer and add margin, maybe add a bit of professional services, whatever it might be, and then propose that to the end client. Additionally, these Microsoft partners may have their own marketplaces in which you could list your solution. So if you think about in the UK, I think there's around 14 indirect providers. So in the more traditional sense, we'll refer to them as Microsoft distributors. Each of those Microsoft distributors are actually contractually committed to Microsoft to provide a marketplace. So it's when we think about marketplace opportunity, yes, the hyperscalers, the 9 million monthly Microsoft active users is 100% where you should be. But also, if you're working with resellers or distributors, in the more traditional sense, don't forget about those guys, because they will have an opportunity to market. And then last, from an access to market perspective, Microsoft do have 15,000 salespeople globally who are actually all incentivized to sell non-Microsoft solutions via the marketplace as well. So yeah, first point, access to market, Microsoft Azure Marketplace for their commercial marketplaces, Microsoft partners, and Microsoft salespeople.
Yeah.
Second piece is obviously with Microsoft and with the likes of AWS, is the fact that they've got this global reach, right? Certainly a number of the ISVs and SaaS providers that I work with, they'll be maybe UK centric, they'll be European centric. They may have had at some point a US type engagement. Well, being listed in one of these hyperscaler marketplaces actually kind of removes those geographic boundaries, right? Because again, using Microsoft as an example, you can transact in 17 different countries and currencies via Microsoft channels, right? And Microsoft take care of the tax in the countries where you're not established. So you're removing the need to, where more traditionally, if you wanted to sell into another country, you needed to go into that other country, have some form of presence, be tax registered or whatever it might be. Microsoft are enabling you to do that without actually having to make that upfront investment. You're able to sell into those other countries. Yes, you do need to consider, if you're selling your solution, like data residency compliance and things such as that. However, we're removing that, as I say, we're kind of removing those geographic boundaries through transacting via the hyperscalers such as Microsoft. Third, and apologies, Leanne, this one is the sort of these kind of the next three are me going on a little bit, but you are welcome to interrupt. When we think about the actual application delivery models in terms of you being a SaaS provider or an ISV, you'll find that actually almost all cloud-based application delivery models are going to be supported. So if it's a SaaS multi-tenant style app, that can be supported. If it's a managed app, so Microsoft uses the term managed app, where it would be you're taking your solution and you're deploying it into an end customer's own environment, and it's made up of multiple resources. You can take that infrastructure as a partner and you can manage that on behalf of the client. So not only are you as an ISV or a SaaS provider providing the infrastructure and the IP, the software, you can actually add a layer of professional services support around that as well. And to your question earlier, that also helps with that end client organizations and compliance, because it all sits within their own cloud environment. There's also virtual machine-based deployments, container-based deployments, there's Power BI apps, there's Dynamics apps, there's a number of other cloud-based application delivery models that are supported. So you're not kind of limited in terms of your preferred application delivery model.
Sounds like there's lots of great options for ISVs.
Yeah, very much so. So yeah, just building on that, right? Is there's actually multiple approaches to commercial engagement. It's almost like you provided me with a fantastic segue there, Leanne. So you can just have your publicly listed plans in the marketplace. So you go to azuremarketplace.com now. You could search for a solution. You'll see the price. You'll see plans aligned to those prices. That's all publicly available today. But what you can also do is provide private offers to a client. So you may be having a deeper engagement with that client. You maybe want to provide them a bit of discount over what's publicly available. You can do that via a private offer. You may want to create a specific support plan for that client and want to make a particular plan with them in mind. You can do that via private offers. Obviously, I previously mentioned where you're engaging with a Microsoft partner, the ability to do those multi-party private offers as well. So you've got a partner layer before proposing to a client. And there's flexibility in terms of that proposal stage as well. And then when we talk about the digital channels to Microsoft, yes, I've mentioned the Azure Marketplace a number of times, but actually you can, there's an app source marketplace. So if we think about Azure marketplaces, maybe like I'm an IT person or I'm somebody who needs a solution for my business. So we're talking multiple users versus app source marketplace, which is more for SaaS app. So I'm an individual user. I need a tool. I could go there. But there's also now in product experiences where you can acquire solutions. So if you think about Teams, for example, and Dynamics, there's actually in-app stores in which you can go and acquire add-ons, as well as obviously the aforementioned routes via Microsoft Salesman partners. And lastly, Leanne, thank you for bearing with me. Appreciate this is a long answer to your question. Is there's the opportunity for multiple purchasing routes, so you're not limiting your client to one purchasing route. There's the opportunity to bill via your credit cards, as you would expect. There's account invoicing. There's also the opportunity to bill via, say, their Azure or their AWS subscription, and whether that's provide via the partner or directly from Microsoft, it can just be a billed line of consumption on that usage. And lastly, if anybody's working with any enterprise size clients, Microsoft have this thing called Azure Consumption Commitment, or more commonly you'll hear Microsoft refer to it as a MAC. And that's where enterprise organizations ultimately are committing a minimum amount of consumption or a minimum amount of spend on Azure to avail a discount from Microsoft. What you can do is your ISV, your SaaS solution, can actually be called off against that commitment. So it doesn't necessarily need to be 100% Azure consumption. It can be your solution, your IP that's called off against that commitment. So again, enterprise organizations are going out and looking for these third-party solutions to utilize against that. In fact, actually, Leanne, if you don't mind, I'm going to add a cheeky seventh, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
So the seventh is these hyperscalers actually do have programs specifically designed to help you get started and differentiate yourself in their marketplaces, as well as actually programs that reward you as you grow your client revenue within their marketplaces. So in the Microsoft world, right, there's a program called the ISV Success Program, which is free for the first year. You can go up and sign up for it today, as long as you're creating a business-to-business solution that's going to be deployed on Azure, and you're going to commit to building that marketplace offer. But that program includes Azure Credit. You get Visual Studio, GitHub internal use rights subscriptions, as well as advisory hours that help you not just build your cloud architecture, but also help you build your marketplace offer as well. And then where I talk about the rewarding you as you grow your client revenue, Microsoft have got this program called Marketplace Rewards, which as you sell more, Microsoft will give you things such as listing optimization recommendations, further Azure credit for the purposes of client proof of concept deployments, feature category placement, blog posts, social media posts, and a whole load of other benefits that will help you help to promote your solution in your marketplace. Leanne, I'm sorry I went on a little bit there, but that is the last of those.
No worries at all. So it sounds like there's so much flexibility and customization for every organization to kind of use it how they please. And also the level of support sounds really helpful, especially for those maybe new to the marketplace or new to the cloud, or new businesses starting up. So there's lots of great benefits there. So what about the ISVs and SaaS providers who might not think their solution is appropriate for the marketplace? What would you say to those?
Sure, and this does come up from time to time based on your last point, right? Is that there's lots of flexibility in terms of your approach to marketplace, and sometimes too much choice and too many options can be a little overwhelming, and I completely get it, but it's certainly becoming less of an issue. Now, what I will say is that in most cases, particularly with Microsoft and AWS, where you're using a hyperscaler marketplace, you will need to be offering some form of cloud-based version of your solutions. That's just a minimum expectation, I suppose. But what I would say is that there's this misconception that, yes, we have a cloud-based version of our solution, but it's not fully automated in terms of the deployment model. We've not reached that point yet. Now, actually, that's not so much of a problem, although, as we previously said, that can be advantageous from the ISV's perspective, because automated deployment means less people and ease. However, if you look at, say, the SaaS-based offer type within Microsoft's Azure marketplace, that doesn't need to be 100% automated. Microsoft will send you an API call. You do some form of provisioning, magical wizardry, back end to get that customer up and running, and then you send that API call right back to Microsoft and say, right, begin billing, begin the client, because they're set up and they're running. So, little bit of a misconception there in terms of everything needing to be fully automated. The second one that I often get, or I have got, is our solution requires a lot of professional services, client configuration services to get them up and running. And when I delve into those conversations with a client, with a client, I'll kind of say, okay, I understand that, but is the core infrastructure that sits behind your solution consistent? Is it rinse and repeat each time? Are you deploying the same resources into Azure each time? And most of the time, they'll say yes. It's actually specifically configuration of their software that needs to be tailored to their specific client. So, with that in mind, Microsoft actually in the last 4 months have added what is referred to as the professional services private offer. So a client can go and purchase your solution via the marketplace, your core infrastructure solution, and you can also then separately, because it's currently separate, provide them with a private offer for the professional services to configure your solution. So that removes that barrier in terms of, if each client is different, each consultative delivery is different, but our infrastructure is the same. Fine, deliver your solution, your IP, via Azure Marketplace, and then provide them with a professional services private offer in line with the consultancy required to configure it and to get that client adopted. But yeah, those are kind of the two main barriers. But I would say, because there's so much flexibility in terms of what you can do with the Azure Marketplace, the AWS Marketplace, it's becoming less and less of a thing in terms of those who think they're not appropriate. And that's where, as I say, always encourage a conversation, right? Don't be afraid to ask the question. Even if it is a no today, then let's understand what that roadmap looks like. You can additionally start with what Microsoft refer to as and actually AWS did the same, contact us style offer, where it's just a free offer in the marketplace which just says contact us. There's no automated provisioning, there's no billing or anything, but you're in the shop window, and if somebody sees your solution, they click contact us as opposed to buy now, they reach out and kick off an engagement. So you're putting yourself in the shop window, even if you don't necessarily think that you're ready. And maybe when you're not ready, I mentioned the fact that we've got all these Microsoft partners, right, who have their own marketplaces. They are probably not going to be as stringent around needing you to have a cloud solution in order to be listed in their marketplace. So think about the opportunity to engage with those guys.
Yeah, of course. And as you say, visibility is so important to growing your business. And it's interesting, though, that you also mentioned about the professional services offering, because I feel like
Yes.
our industry is kind of moving into that direction more, where more companies are not just selling software or apps, they're selling services as well. So it's really good that
Yeah.
organizations like Microsoft are catering for that.
Yeah, very, very much so. Right, the number that we're talking to, they're thinking about building out managed service offerings in and around that application, right, to increase their GP per deal. It makes perfect sense. So, yeah, why not take advantage of that opportunity? But I think that the biggest factor around marketplace really is treating it as a viable go to market channel for your business, and really giving yourself the focus time to do so. Don't just assume that because we're in a Microsoft marketplace and there's those 9 million active users each month, that opportunities are just going to walk through the door. It's not a thing, right? So yes, you may see some come in, but there's still an opportunity here for you to, um, as I said at the beginning, simplify your client adoption process, simplify your client billing process, and use the marketplace as a way in which to do that, to support your existing engagements, not just wait for things to come in.
Yeah, definitely. So, what 3 takeaways or resources would you recommend to our listeners?
Sure. So you've obviously heard me ramble on here today, and hopefully that gives you some indication of our knowledge as grey matter and capability to at least begin to infer or suggest around marketplace. So certainly reach out to us. Right, there's no cost for a conversation. Just reach out and have a chat, and we can kind of suggest what is or isn't possible. So that would be the first kind of go do if you're interested in marketplace and you want to pick somebody's brains. We're here to do that. So we've done for a number of ISVs. The second that I mentioned is the ISV Success Program. I would certainly recommend. The Microsoft ISV Success Program is go and sign up for that. Leanne, I think we said we can put links in the description of this recording. Awesome. So we'll do that. So free for the first year. If you have previously signed up for the ISV Success Program and maybe didn't take advantage of it first time round, but are at a point in which you actually feel like you can, reach out to us, because there is an opportunity to engage with Microsoft in and around that piece to get you back on the program. And then the last one from me in terms of a really great resource is Microsoft have a website called Mastering the Marketplace, which has a ton of resources that takes you through step by step in terms of how to build your offer based on your preferred offer type. So whereas I said previously, you could have your SaaS based off app, you could have your Azure managed app, your virtual machine, your container app, Power, etc. This Mastering the Marketplace site has kind of the how-tos in terms of both videos, but also readable content that you can work through at a granular level. And it certainly helped me when it came to getting up to speed with understanding how to best advise those that we work with. So there you go. There's 3 for you.
Thank you. These sound like really useful resources. It's well worth a look. As Chris mentioned, we will put links in the episode description, but likewise, just reach out to us for more information. So, thank you, Chris. It was a really interesting session on the benefits of the cloud marketplace, especially the information you covered on all the flexibility, resources, and support that Microsoft Marketplace offers. Seems like a no brainer for our listeners to consider it.
No worries.
And thank you to our listeners. We hope you enjoyed the episode. If you have any questions, please email info@greymatter.com and we'll pass them on to Chris or one of our Microsoft team. So that's a wrap on today's episode of Grey Matter Talks Tech. We have future episodes with industry experts on developer tools, technology trends, and cybersecurity. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and keep posted on when a new episode is live. Thanks again. Have a great day.